Hello, Bill's sisters. Welcome to our January 26th episode of Light on Bills. Um, as you can tell, my illness is progressing. I'm not getting better. I've had a rough night and day, like literally 24 hours of sleeping, but it's not COVID. So I think COVID test is a gold mine, right? No matter what we get now, we're like, oh, is it COVID? So I tested like everyone does, I guess. It's negative. I've never had a positive COVID test, even when everyone around me had COVID. So we just assumed I had COVID. I'm coming at you today, obviously, also with a delay as usual. So that's kind of okay, like so stuff happens and then we can process it. One big thing is that Josh is now in the top five finalists for the MVP 2023 NFL award. Top five, like, isn't he top one? And just curious what everyone's thoughts on that are, and also to emphasize that the MVP award is supposed to go to the person who's the most valuable player to their team. And ever since Josh got here, yesterday I covered that discussion about heroic behavior, but that should not detract from the fact that Josh literally has been the guy that puts his team, the Bills Mafia, Buffalo and all of Western New York on his shoulders and then literally runs for the touchdown or the 13-yard first down or whatever it is. And man, I don't have the statistics in front of me now, but I started watching a small video about it, which I'm going to share, that makes the case for Josh to be MVP. But we know going into the postseason that he had the all-time record for passing and rushing touchdowns per game, which I think stood at 15 in a row or something like that. So, and his jersey is now in the NFL Hall of Fame in Akron, Ohio, his jersey from that game. So it's just so weird that the dude's jersey is getting more profile, more hype than the guy himself. Just doesn't make sense. So anyhow, that's topic number one. The other thing that's going on is Bill Belichick has been effectively silenced in these discussions about head coaching jobs. With the position in Atlanta now being filled, and among the Bills Mafia, of course, there's this like discussion, opinion to have him come to the Bills. And I just want to share that Fran Levy, whose husband is Marv Levy, said just earlier this month that she cannot stand Bill Belichick, that he's mean, and she hopes he never wins another game ever. And I would say, for someone, okay, Marv Levy is a very diplomatic guy. I mean, diplomatic, brilliant, what's the word? I want to say, tactician is someone, anyhow, strategist, one of the greatest probably of all time. And he has a master's in English history from Harvard. Okay. So he has a community in Boston, and Bill Belichick obviously has a community in Boston. And Fran's point is that he's never been nice to Marv. So screw him. anyone who is not worshiping the ground that Marv Levy walks on does not belong in Buffalo. So hands up if you're with me on that. And by the way, 4 of the 6 hires for head coach are now people of color. So this Rodney rule or whatever it's called, I haven't looked into it. I should, I should do due diligence. It's working. I mean, now if you want to do a little bit of a side discussion on that, and you hear the flack about it among fans of the NFL. Their language also sounds like it's ticking a box. Okay, well, we've now interviewed a person of color, so therefore, we've done our job. And here's the difference: is to have a criteria like that, you must hire people of color. You must hire people from diverse, or you must interview. So, okay, sorry, I've totally messed that up. You must interview people of color. Is not at all the same as having hiring targets or the infamous quotas discussion, which even women disclaim. I don't want to be hired on the basis of my gender or of my race. I want to be hired because I'm the best person for the job. Sorry, that's me talking. Or, maybe it's Bill Belichick. But this is language that we need to get away from, because I will tell you, meritocracy, and please repeat after me, meritocracy is a joke. It is an illusion. It does not exist. And as long as women and people of color keep parroting this bullshit, we will continue to be exploited and we will suffer. Repeat after me. Meritocracy is a joke. It does not exist. Just look, what have we been talking about in the NFL? So and so comes from such and such hierarchy. They were there and then they went there. I don't even have to say they. He was there, he went there, he got fired, he got rehired, he got fired again, he got rehired, and just the way, just how banal the discussion is about he was fired there and then how about when a woman gets fired? I mean, a woman at middle management, because this is right at the age that we start having children, so then we're phased out of the system, like Cheryl Sandberg did, supported a study that calls it the broken first rung. So, if you talk about the ladder to senior management, if you miss the first rung, of course, that's the end of the game. You're not going to advance because you're not even on the ladder, let alone can you climb the ladder. Or we talk about, the glass ceiling, the glass escalator, the glass elevator, whatever, it doesn't matter. It starts at management level, which is the age when, we assume those gender roles. Women go out of the workforce for at least part of the time. I mean, chunks of time to go out. And then, we haven't even been fired necessarily. We might go on maternity leave if there is such a thing. We might go part-time, or we might just quit that job that we're in, thinking, okay, we're going to go back in to the workforce when the kids are a certain age. And in my case, I thought it was a luxury. Okay, I can do this, so I am going to do this. Let me tell you, that's going to come around to bite you in the ass. And I didn't intend on launching into this another tirade, but I'm going to tell you why. Because as it is, what applies to men in the workforce does not apply to women. So all of the cacophony you hear out there about, change jobs to advance, be, Machiavellian, etc. None of this applies to women because there is a double standard. When your resume is looked at and you have gaps, you're on the defensive immediately. And often it's women who are looking at those resumes. So they're like, what was she doing? And also that has to stop, by the way, because you have a womb. You've probably had kids. Why are you applying that standard to the person that you're reviewing? Like, well, she was doing something wrong. No, we were doing the thing that society expects us to do, creating future society members and hopefully good ones, right? So that freaking takes time. And women should not be punished for that, but we are. So, I'm all for being, and this is something that I've toyed with now for a while, is I'm all for being honest, about the gaps. But let me tell you, when the door's closed and it's not going to open, if you manage to get a crack open, the door open a crack and get your resume in there, and there are those gaps, bam, it's going to slam again. So you won't even get interviews. You won't, let alone get the job again because of this double standard. But what actually happens is you take time off, you go back in, you start at a lower level. And I can't say how many times I've said to myself, well, I'll just do this to get my foot in the door. That you take things that are beneath your capacities, if you will even be interviewed for such a thing, because, it's like, she's overqualified. She's underqualified. You're never going to get a fair shake. So my advice is, so I've unpacked, it doesn't take a lot of work because there aren't that many women women CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. No. I mean, maybe now, but the last time I looked at the data and looked at the profiles, I could count them on two hands. That might have been Fortune 100. Anyhow, it doesn't matter, because we can extrapolate from the data that we have, which is, here are the profiles of women in American leadership. They have worked for the same company. Why am I getting these graphics? That's funny. They've worked for the same company, have not left. So they have like a 15 or 20-year track record. So this, like, changing jobs, moving around, is detrimental. That's what we can infer in the opposite direction. So stay in the same place, don't move around. They have a lot of kids or 0 kids. So that's also important to, I mean, honestly, when I say a lot, I mean like 4 or 5. I don't mean the average. Okay, so they have an unaverage number of kids, either 0 or a lot. And obviously, if you have 0 kids, you can really pour yourself into your professional life. And by the way, I encourage it. I'm encouraging my daughter to do this. And you know what? Didn't we all say we never wanted kids? Well, this is why. Because they cost, having kids costs as much as buying a house, they say. But what does it cost in opportunity cost for women? So having and raising kids, we are penalized for much more than men, much more than the father of the very same children. On the contrary, men get a break. Oh, he's a dad of 3 kids, and he's holding down the fort. Therefore, we have to bring him in at this level with this salary. So we don't get that. We do not get that benefit of the doubt. There's some, like, this is also a double-edged sword for men. They also have heart attacks more frequently. They have more stress. They die younger than women. So This could be like, the tipping the balance in the other direction. But there may be some other things about the profile of women in Fortune 100. I don't exactly remember, but those are some key ones. Don't move around and either have a lot of kids or 0 kids, which we can unpack at another time. And by not moving around, the rationale for that is simply because you're like a bad penny. You keep turning up. This has happened to me, actually. It's like, oh, it's her again. She's got the biggest mouth. She's always going to take the counterpoint. Have those, I try to behave myself honestly, but but it's an unpopular position to speak truth to authority. So, and then you're also saying stuff that maybe everyone is feeling but is too afraid to say. So that has also kind of been my my MO. So that's why you stay in one place. Then I mean, the other thing is that even when we stay in one place, we do that job, we get paid less, right? That's a fact. So the gender pay gap is a real thing. A man gets paid, 20, so 20 to 25% more for the same work. Is that the number in the US? I don't know, but I know the numbers. I'm more familiar with the numbers in Europe, where, for example, even in Holland, even in places where these things are protected, let's say, and a lot of it is socialized, so there's more focus on it. It's not as much, it's not as private. These numbers still hover around like the 24% mark. So a man gets 24% more per hour than a woman for the same job. And then you have, so you have women who work less because we take time off. We also work more flexible jobs because, we want to be able to be home for the kids, because that's also what we're socialized to do. And honestly, we might enjoy it. Let's be honest, but men enjoy that too. So we are home. We take those also because we're going to get less paid, or we're going to get paid less. So we take we don't fill up our entire days with a worse paying job, because then the opportunity cost of just spending the time with the kids directly is less than what we will get paid. Or, yeah, it's more cost beneficial to stay home. That's a perennial problem all over the world, because of the cost of childcare and the undervaluing of the care economy. It should actually be subsidized so that that is not a cost, which ends up in the laps of women. So there you go. Regulations are very sexist. And then when we try to put these discussions on the table, well, they're gendered, so they also don't get treated with the respect that they deserve. So this is actually the reason to support, kind of social policy making. As unpopular as that sounds, do not drink the Kool-Aid, because anything of that kind will benefit women. It will. There is an absolute gender component to this discussion, and therefore women need to support those kinds of policies. They benefit us. We have worse jobs, so we get paid less. They're part-time, they're more precarious. Sometimes they're not even official, like if you work in the salon for our friend, and she'll pay us a bit on the side or tips. So more precarious, informal economy, no benefits. And when we are in the more formal economy, we're taking the less paid jobs, that are also still more precarious, by the way, also more likely to be taken over by the AIs, administrative roles or things like that. They're not as mission critical sometimes. So when there are economic fluctuations, we are disproportionately impacted. So we get marginalized. Look at what happened during COVID. And so this makes a very bumpy career path for women. It kind of goes up and down as you try to progress, but really your career path looks more like that, right? Because you're not getting promoted into management. We don't have a network that supports us into leadership. Because if it's sufficient just to look and see how many women are in management. None, like 20%. I mean, those are especially in male dominated sectors where, male dominated sectors get notoriously better paid. And the more women get into the sectors, the more the pay goes down. Isn't that awful? Also a gender component. So there's a gender component also to minimum wage discussions. There's a gender component to student loan discussions. So many more women are saddled with student loans that we cannot pay because of everything I'm talking about. We can barely feed ourselves and our kids, let alone have those loans to pay off. And at the same time, our authority is questioned. So we actually need more degrees to get our foot in the door. So we end up saddled with all that student loan debt, but we can't get a job that corresponds to being able to pay off the debt. So yes, please don't drink the Kool-Aid around student loan repayment. It favors women to have such policies. So worse kinds of jobs, worse paid, no advancement into senior roles. So there's the glass ceiling, right? And, I also want you to think about this self-selecting out of leadership, because this is also a phenomenon, right? The few women who get into leadership roles get burned out and say, I'm out of here. I don't like, we get a view on what kind of circus it is, the backstabbing and for men, it's a game. It's like the game of football. We go out there, we play, you got hurt today, pat you on the back, we won, let's go play golf. So they've got each other's backs, generally speaking. It's a game. For women, it's life and death. We do not have a support structure to bootstrap women into leadership. We also don't have a safety net. So if you fall out of those roles, or if you self-select out because you don't want to participate in the bullshit, I mean, honestly, it's a hostile environment, just like the internet. When you get the backlash from being on here as a woman, you say, I don't want to participate. You close the laptop. But this is, I think, the biggest dilemma for me is, it is a hostile environment. I've been approached by women in leadership, and I have a really difficult time telling them to stick with it because of all the bullshit that you have to internalize and deal with. You have to be a real hard ass, maybe a psychopath, to stick with it. So, but at the same time, if those few women who are there don't stay there, then the rest of us, and young women and little girls look up and there are no women there. So, they don't think that it's possible for them to do XYZ, to be a leader, to launch a startup, to be a tech entrepreneur, or, whatever. It's just, this is the problem is, I mean, it's again a kind of catch-22 situation. If more women don't stay in that hostile environment, there's no chance for us to making it less hostile towards women. So this is why we talk about quotas, because this is systemic bias. It is a situation dominated by a particular demographic, and that demographic does not represent broader society. It does not include people of, indigenous or people of color, and definitely doesn't include women. So there's been movement inside the NFL to fight racism. And this is where this Rodney rule comes from. But the Rodney rule is like a guideline. It's like you must interview people of color for any role, any openings. I don't know exactly what, I'm just, summarizing. Until we start to say, not only should you be interviewing it, because remember yesterday we talked about KPIs, key performance indicators. So you could say a key performance indicator is how many interviews are held for a particular role and how many interviews are conducted with people of color, and how about different genders as well? How about we have some KPIs around gender? Oh no, that would be too forward thinking, except that women make up half of the entire population of the globe. And as I said, half of the fan base in the NFL and in other sports. We'll get back to Title IX later, because Title IX is really a best practice, in NCAA sports, where basically you have to invest the same money in women's athletic programs as men's athletic programs. And that has resulted in some incredible outcomes, including that if U.S. women's Olympic teams competed as its own country, like in Rio, I recall this statistic, we would have been third overall as a team in the number of medals accumulated. So that's a clear success story. Did men lose because women get money? No. We just leveled up the ability for women to compete and be compensated for their excellence. And that's the whole diversity pie. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not scarcity. It's really that you're adding more talent and more opportunity to the entire equation. Which also brings me back to, women in leadership, because there is this, and honestly, I found it to be surprisingly acute in these United States of America, that women in leadership do not make room for other women in leadership. It's almost like, again, that they're drinking the same Kool-Aid. One thing that we know, a known error about bootstrapping women into leadership, or just, women in corporate structures or any structures, is that incompetent male bosses pull the plug on competent women. The same, of course, can be said for women male bosses. So maybe it's just a question of competence. It's incompetence versus competence. But the thing that we have data on is that male incompetent bosses are, it's always like that. Anyone is threatened by someone who's got more competence, I guess, than they do. So that's a thing. But then the whole gender element about that is what we call the queen bee syndrome. So if I've fought all of the battles and gotten my way up to this level of, in the company, I pull up the ladder and I'm going to stay there on my own, because I enjoy being the one woman. I am the one woman at the table. I check the boxes because I'm here. So I'm not going to share this limelight with anyone else. If you want to get here, you can take the difficult path that I did. If I can do it, you can too, without my help. So women misogynists is a thing. Wake up. Yeah, women misogynists is a thing. Of course, because we're all drinking the Kool-Aid. This is the so-called unconscious bias. So women misogynists, we are we behave in such a way that, is detrimental to ourselves, to other women, and we behave like, in harmful ways towards other women. And, it's unconscious. It's what we see as how we must behave it's about survival. And, this is what men are told as well. Like it's mutually exclusive. If I'm going to get ahead, you're not. I'm going to hold you back. And that's how a hierarchy works, right? Like, not everyone can make it to the top. But this is also where quotas work. You can still say at senior management level that you want 30% of those people to be women. Could say half because we are half the population. And knowing that women self-select out and knowing that we've got a more, circuitous route to get there, that there's more expected from us socially to have children, to raise children, all that. So you don't just give guidelines, KPIs on the number of people you're going to interview for that slot and the kind of people that you're going to interview for that slot. You actually have targets for the number of BIPOCs and women who will fill that tier of the organization. And I use the number 30%, because this is where we start to see a change in the mindset. So instead of a white cis male echo chamber of decision making, when 30% of the people in the discussion are women, for example, then you see, amplification of ideas, onboarding, belonging of that particular demographic, and influence on decision making and influence on outcome, which, by the way, is positive in every sense. So that's maybe for another time. But in terms of social impact for the organization, of bottom line, so better earnings, of innovation, more innovative thinking and outcomes and products and services. And this is what I was talking about yesterday on process thinking. So more diverse thought going in has more innovation as an outcome, regardless of what it is that you're innovating on. So 30% is the benchmark. And instead of just saying we are going to interview people of color, how about we have targets for actually hiring people of color, and by the way, women, and of other diverse backgrounds. So, what we call intersectional. So not only women, but women of color and women of, different sexual orientation, other abled, that's people with different intersectional influencing factors. That also is what makes up this richness of our society and the richness of thinking and mindset, including, by the way, neurodiversity. And that has been demonstrated to be in the benefit of organizations who do those things. So one last word on quotas, okay, and then I will stop this rant. Like I said before, don't repeat, don't lean into this narrative about meritocracy. That's a joke. Really, no one is hired based on merit. The entire patriarchy is built on a buddy system of bootstrapping each other into leadership and keeping the lid on ownership among a certain group of individuals, a certain kind of individual. So if you want to, if we keep parroting meritocracy, I only want to get into that role because I'm the best person, we are shooting ourselves in the foot. And I do use the term exploitation. So women, in a way, are being exploited for the economy. We carry the entire economy on our backs with no, we're doing all the caregiving, and a lot of it is uncompensated, and that precarious work. And so taking all the shit jobs, and this is so our partners, our husbands can go out and work those better paid jobs, advance. So we're doing all that so that they can benefit, or so that we can benefit. But, then our input into this discussion is becoming completely silenced. And so we're being exploited without any kind of corresponding benefit to us as people. And often we don't wake up to that reality until we're like my age, until we're like trying to get into this closed system at the top. And we simply can't, because we don't have women allies and we don't have men allies. So stop the discussion on meritocracy. It's garbage. And here's the other thing. I got to share this anecdote that I really love, is from my days working in technology policy in Europe. And one of my role models is Nelly Cruz, who was the first ever commissioner for the digital agenda for Europe. So that's kind of like a minister of IT, basically. First ever ministry for IT, led by a Dutch woman. And at that time, so here's the other thing. If you get like, the shudders or the hives from people talking about quotas at the most senior level, like board members, we want 50-50. And by the way, the average group of women is more diverse than the average group of men. So if you simply say you're going to have half women, half men, you're already going to get all kinds of other diversity as well. Anyhow, in the European Commission, there's, one commissioner per country of the European Union. That's like, and they each have a ministry for which they are responsible at the European level. And each member state, each country of the EU appoints their commissioner. And there's a very important principle in Europe, and it's very much like the US, this federation. In the US, we have 50 states, we have the federal government, and never the twain shall meet, right? We have very clear delineation of the responsibilities for the state and the responsibilities for the federal government. It's very similar in Europe, and they call this the subsidiarity principle. In fact, they say the EU is subsidiary to the member states. So the countries have their sovereign nations. The EU is beneath that. So on that basis, the EU cannot tell the member states anything about who they should appoint to the commissioner roles, or what they should look like, or what they should love or favor or whatever. But they can still create guidelines. So the EU said, we would like to have 50-50 representation between men and women, people who identify as men, people who identify as women, among the College of Commissioners. Fine, the member states don't have to do it. Just like the states of the US don't have to try to have a male or female governor. That's a lot harder, by the way, because that's an elected role. So, but as far as the commissioners, it's an appointment. So if the European Union says we want to try to have 50-50 in this college of 27, 28 commissioners. So the last round, or now this is 2 rounds of EU commissions ago. And by the way, we're heading into another EU election cycle in the coming year. So all this is going to start over. There's a huge fundamentalist movement in the EU and in Europe, which is, I won't even go into that discussion right now. It's kind of the same everywhere. There are definitely particular actors who are helping this to happen. So we've got European elections coming up, and the same thing. I mean, I don't even know if people are in the mood to say we want to have 50-50 in the Commissioners College. But at this time, so 10 years ago, there was this movement to have, equal or gender parity among the College of Commissioners. And Nelly Cruz was the commissioner for the Netherlands. And someone interviewed her in Ireland and accused her of benefiting from these quotas. You wouldn't be here if it weren't for the quota. And Nelly Cruz's answer was yes. Mic drop. I can't tell that story enough. By the way, Nelly Cruz, just check out her Wikipedia page, is freaking awesome. And basically her point was, yeah, the world would not have benefited from my presence here if there was not a target for me to be here. So screw meritocracy, screw the patriarchy. I'm here because of that quota, but I also deserve to be here, and I wouldn't be here otherwise. And this is better for everyone. And that's the bottom line. So start to embrace, get your mouth around that word quotas. Stop talking about meritocracy. It'll only backfire for you and for all women and for people of color and with intersecting factors. And hello, NFL should also institute some quotas. Now, if we arrive at this by accident, that's fine. But it shouldn't be an accident to be inclusive. That's my bottom line on that. And the takeaway is that in order to tackle structural impediments to inclusion, because this is what we're talking about, those hierarchies, remember everything I was talking about yesterday, cronyism and nepotism and the old boy network, the young boy network. This is institutionalized discrimination. It's systemic bias. And the only way to tackle systemic bias is by a systemic mechanism to stop it. Guidelines generally are not sufficient. You really have to have targets. So quotas. Okay, end of rant. We talked about Bill Belichick. We talked about MVP. We talked about the head coaches and diversity discussion. One of the other things that I was, we still have not fully unpacked our loss in the divisional round. And one of the things that came out was that Ed Oliver had zero pressures in that game, which was the first time since like some time in the 2021 season that this happened to him. So in a game with two high-scoring offenses, including with Patrick Mahomes, the fact that one of our key defensive linebackers had no statistical representation at all could be a defining characteristic of that game. Why it happened, how it happened. On cover one, they said he was double teamed the whole game. I didn't see that. And I mean, I don't have the tapes, but I would like to see, I'd like to look at it. And it would all seem consistent with Andy Reid's approach, which is very Belichickian, I guess, take away what they're good at. If you see that Ed Oliver is that MVP or, Pro Bowl caliber, you're going to want to stop him. And then, of course, all the rest of the defense was decimated. So I don't know. I say the defense has been decimated all year, and still McDermott has managed to keep Bills in the games. I think that speaks volumes to Sean McDermott. I'm being interrupted, and my screen just died. Okay, so this is wide right Mark II. Just kidding. The electricity went out. Go figure. Also, it's like 75 degrees today in Northern Virginia. So officially, these are the end times. As you know, last week, this entire region had lake effect snow, which is what I'm calling it, like for the past 2 weeks. So the entire eastern seaboard had snow. And today it's 75, real feel of 76. So the planet is revolting and the AIs are taking over. And that's the only other thing I really wanted to cover today, like, just lightly, is also I tried to stream this, but you have to activate it. It takes 24 hours before you can actually live stream on YouTube. So fair enough, whatever. Um, and also my husband informs me that these videos are in 380p, but I don't have the technology, I admit. I'm using my son's laptop, which has absolutely no storage or capacity to even edit these videos. So also I apologize. We will improve over time. Hopefully, it's a learning curve for everyone, and it's not the how, but the what. So, the AIs are taking over, and this is the other thing I wanted to just touch on today, which is the deep fake videos of Taylor Swift. Okay, also my mail client keeps pinging in the background, and it's so annoying because it's getting captured on the computer audio. So you all know when I'm getting email. And it's all spam, don't worry. I'm not popular. Well, I'm as popular as everyone else because it's all spam, which is also AIs. So let's talk about that. So there were deep fake videos of Taylor Swift that got 45 million views on X before they were shut down. How many of you know what deep fakes are? It's like basically when people, I'm not going to say men, I'm going to say people, take your image, your likeness, your face, and whatever else they can about you, and use AIs to make sexual videos, make porn with your image without your consent. Obviously not okay. This is the new big thing. It's not even new. It's been going on for some time, and I just casually mentioned that I've been working on the issue of online safety for a very long time. And women are the targets of like 90% or higher of this kind of crap. So, if you want to attack a woman online, this is the way to do it, right? Is to use her likeness and make porn out of it and then spread that. Unfortunate use of the term. And the authorities say that it should be the platforms that police this stuff. Like, and then but Twitter, since that Melon Tusk guy took over, dropped all of their moderation policies. So it's a freaking free for all. And we would all abandon it, wouldn't we? Because he's such a jerk. We'd all abandon that platform, but is there a real alternative? I mean, there are alternatives, but this is what we're used to, and this is why he bought it, because now he's got control of the means of production of messaging, of media, even what we're seeing and thinking. So it's a cesspool. It already was a cesspool, And now we've got a guy in charge who is just leaning into it remaining a cesspool. And that is going to be to the disadvantage of women, generally speaking, because it is already a hot mess, male locker room. And now it's like anything goes. Underwritten. It's underwriting the fact that anything goes. So 45 million views. No, I'm not going to show it. No, I'm not even going to look at it. And, Taylor Swift, it hits home for us, right? It's painful because of her connection with Kelsey and the Kansas City Chiefs, but there's no excuse, And I rattled off the success stories of women in entertainment yesterday. They've all seen their fair share of hard knocks. I wasn't even being ironic there. I do not wish that on Taylor Swift. She doesn't deserve it. Also, she's a success story, and I truly hope that she's got the right entourage around her who's protecting her from all this absolute bullshit. And if it means that Travis Kelce has to get out there and kick people's asses on the field and off, that's what I want. Or if her lawyers are going to get out there and kick people's asses, that's what I want. But, these are the sweatshops of the new millennium, is people in certain countries of the world who are promoting artificial intelligence and data farms that support their production of deep fakes to sway general opinion, to take down certain personas, to make money, generally speaking. This is very difficult to police. So unfortunately, it's not going anywhere. In the US, there have been attempts to regulate deep fakes, and non-consensual images of private images or intimate images. This hasn't really gone anywhere on the federal level, but there is some movement at the state level, like California, Georgia, my very own state of Virginia. How much this can be enforced or will be enforced is a whole nother question. And if we take other kinds of violations of women as a benchmark, then we know that, the future is not extremely promising. So I kind of just hope, because in Europe some time ago, all these dating websites, all the private data on these dating websites was leaked. And what we found out was that like 80% of quote women's profiles were actually run by men. So 80% of women's profiles, 100% of men's profiles are run by men. So this is another situation of men's locker rooms. It's just men and men talking to each other, even in the guise of half of them being women, and then getting their rocks off. So what we have now with deep fakes is, actual women are out of the discussion. You have content about women being created, probably by men. Not 100% certain, but we can't really get the data on that. So created probably by men, for men. And that's the scenario. But the content is about women. And it's highly derogatory, degrading, humiliating. Have at it. If this is entertainment for you, I will not withhold judgment, but I will withhold articulating my judgment. And then my question is, like, in the rest of the world, so if you have these enclaves where that is happening, and they're not even small enclaves, right? This is really big, 45 million views. how much of that leaks into mainstream, so-called mainstream? How much of that is influencing how men see women and how women see themselves? This is no small discussion because, Gina Davis, she has, she was the star of Thelma and Louise back in the day and A League of Their Own. She's also the UN envoy for girls in ICT. Okay. But she has the Gina Davis Institute for Gender and Media. The only person really studying this stuff, like what's the impact of negative portrayal of girls and women in Hollywood films on actual girls and women and actual boys and men? Well, it turns out it's not good because of the tropes, because of, what men start to think women are. It devalues uh, you know, their impression of girls and women, but also girls and women start to devalue themselves. They also lose confidence. So there's a whole slippery slope thing that we easily dismiss as being, meaningless, or we are overreacting. But the reality is that the more boys watch TV and films, the more they become sexist. And the more girls watch movies and film, or TV and film, the more they lose self-confidence, because it's like, well, I don't fit in that box or that box or that box. So where do I fit in? I'm not like that. And one of the real outcomes of this has been, which was marked for me when I came back to the US after being away for so long, was the hypersexualization of girls, like Daisy Dukes and plunging necklines of 13-year-olds. This was legit not the case 20 years ago. Legit. So, and here's the rub, because that we can all say this is just my impression and I'm overreacting, but the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, which regulates all of this content on TV and in communication channels, which is completely different definition than it was back then, right? Because we have the interwebs. De facto, what used to be considered soft porn is now mainstream. So, and I blame that, oh man, I can't even remember it. That whole, I want to say it was Wild Girls or the Girls on Film, the collegiate like porn stuff. I blame that really as the turning point for what became normalized in US society, in particular in the US, that has now influenced the rest of the world, because that's how Hollywood is. It is like, it's the worst or the best form of cultural capitalism, cultural imperialism you can think of. So that norm has spread, not the same way as it has here. It's like unthinkable. And then you have like girls who don't want to be girls anymore. You have girls who have boys' names, who, like we're trying to shield them even, or they're trying to shield themselves. Understandably, because like, is that what I'm supposed to become? Is this the best possible opportunities, outcomes for me down the line? I don't freaking want it. That's totally understandable. So the role of media in influencing girls and women in terms of what we think we're capable of, but also influencing boys and men in terms of what they are capable of and what they think we are capable of, is real. And I don't know about this, this situation with Taylor Swift is like unacceptable. It's absolutely unacceptable. But how do we stop it? Because we have not found the tools to regulate artificial intelligence. If there's anywhere in the world where they're trying, it's in Europe. And Brussels was always kind of the last bastion for managing the internet, in particular as impacts individual human beings. The US never had a, well, skin in the game, yes, because all the tech companies are American. So their position on these matters was active indifference. And we always counted on Brussels to be the last bastion of what is good for people. But I can tell you, during my time in Brussels, the influence of American lobbyists has exploded. We used to have a register of lobbyists in Brussels, and people didn't even use the word lobbyist. I was like, what? We used to have a register, had like 40 names on it. Now it's a freaking machine. It's an industry because of what I'm saying. There's so much money to be lost or gained in this discussion around privacy, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. It's another hat I wear, but just not right now. I mean, actually, yes, right now. Anyhow, so my only hope would be that, that these could just remain enclaves for boys, by boys, and about women. That's really tough. So my message is really to the boys and men. Don't fucking watch this shit. Okay? Don't do this to women. Because #girl dad, when you become the father of a girl, or if you are the father of a girl or the brother, why would you want to promote this dehumanizing element towards her? Wait a minute, I left out your mother, because sexism and ageism is, hello, that's a thing. And I think men just never, maybe some, think of in terms of what that means to the women that you care about. You need to not participate in any way, certainly not encourage it. And, take a stand in those circles where this is being done. Just say, hey, I'm not about that. And you know what? Neither are you. It's not funny. Let's stop. Because we don't blame the victims, right? Here, Taylor Swift is clearly the victim and all of womankind. So we don't have to change our behavior. Men have to change theirs. That's enough for today, right? Go Bills.